What's up everyone? In this video, I'm going to be going over Payload CMS versions 3.38 to 3.50. There's a lot of new ground to cover in this video, anything from new translations all the way up to new features in the admin UI that will make life easier. If you want the code that I'm using in this video, there's a link to the repo in the description. Now, let's dive in, starting with version 3.38. Latvian is a new language supported in Payload CMS. You can add this to your project just like you would with any other language by first adding the Payload CMS translations package if you don't already have it installed. And once that installs, you can import your languages. So I'm going to import our English translation from Payload CMS translations languages, and we'll pull it out from English. And then our new Latvian translation from LV. We can then add this to our internationalization object and add our supported languages as an object with our English and Latvian translations. As of version 3.38, group field names are now optional. Up to this point, as you may know, group fields have been data fields, meaning that they write data to the database. So, for example, if you have a group called SEO and a field called title inside that group, that title field is actually SEO.title. When you leave out the group field's name, it becomes presentational. So it's no longer SEO.title, it's just title. And what that means is that you need to make sure you don't have any duplicate field names when using an unnamed group field. Because in the past, if you had a named group field with the same field name as another field, it did not conflict. But now, without having a name in your group field, there may be conflicts. This is helpful for when you want to make sure that fields in your admin UI stay together under a group, but you don't want to add an extra layer to your database. So this is how you will enable it in your collections. So first, we're going to create a new collection that is going to be in the posts directory, and it's going to be our config.ts. Then we can import type collection config from payload, and then we're going to export our constant of posts with the collection config type and give it the required fields here, which is going to be slug posts, and then fields, which we will pass in a label for our page header, for example, which will be a type of group, and we'll have fields that will be our name, will be title, type text, as well as our description, which will also be type text. We can add our posts to our collections array here, and then run payload generate types. And then when we spin up our development server and go to our posts to create a new post, we can see that we have our unnamed group here with a label, which we can just pass in a title and a description. And when we save this, we'll see in the API response that there is no group name here, just the title and the description. There were circumstances where you could lock yourself out of your query presets. This is now prevented through a quick validation check behind the scenes. As a result of the query preset lockout fix, override access is now threaded to the validation option in a field. Let's see what that looks like. So we'll go back to our post config, and just in our title here, we can first make this a little bit more legible, and then we can add our validate, make it a function that takes a value of any type as well as args of any type. And then in our arguments, we can pull out override access as a check to then return the value if we are overriding the access. For multi-tenant, there's now a confirmation modal that makes it extremely clear that you are changing which tenant you are operating in. This just makes it easier for users to tell when they're making that change and which tenant they're now operating under. Pre-signed URLs are now supported for file downloads with the S3 storage adapter. If you don't have the S3 storage adapter installed, you can run pnpm add Payload CMS storage S3. And once that's added, you can go to your payload config, and we're going to import our S3 storage from Payload CMS storage S3. Then down in our plugins, we can remove this and add S3 storage. Then we'll include our collections, which will be our media collection, and just set signed downloads to true. And just to make sure that we have all of the required fields, even though this is not really configured in this project, I'm just going to copy and paste all of the other required fields here. And so the key feature here is that signed downloads set to true will enable this new feature for you. You're also able to change true to an object to change the expiry time. So let's say we want this to expire after 1 hour, and this is a time set in seconds. This change makes it easier and more performant to share large files through Payload CMS because it's coming directly from your S3 bucket rather than through Payload CMS. And now again, I don't have S3 configured for this project, so let's comment this out to prevent any issues as we continue with the video. You can now customize the fixed toolbar in your lexical rich text field. You can change things like the order or the icons that you use in your fixed toolbar, as well as provide a custom icon by setting child component to a client component. Let's see this in action by first creating in our source directory a new file called app-components-custom-icon.tsx. So I'll hit enter, and this will create a components directory with our custom icon here. And I'm just going to paste in an SVG icon. So I need to make a couple of quick adjustments here to our text to ensure that I'm matching React's rules. All right, that looks good. We've got this as a client component. And then we're going to go over to our config, and we're going to add a new field to the top so we can easily demonstrate this. It'll be name of content. It'll have the type of rich text, and it'll be an editor, which will specifically be our lexical editor, which will import automatically for me at the top of my file here. And then in lexical editor, we want to get our features, and then our features will be able to pull out our default features, and then we can return an array of our default features, as well as our fixed toolbar feature, which again should import automatically for you. Double check that it does. Then we'll add our custom groups, and I'll replace our text with an object just to say that our order is 10. And then I'm going to use child component and import our custom icon from our app components custom icon. So I can save this, then we can go to our edit, and we see here that we have our text, which is going to be a different style of icon. So if I remove our custom group and refresh, we see that that icon changes back to a normal text icon there. So again, to see it in action, I will re-enable custom groups, refresh, and we see that our text icon has changed, and it is now first compared to this add button here. Now, instead of child component, I can also change type to be buttons. It'll change our dropdown to be buttons instead. Again, I can change the order, and that list of buttons is now moved to the end. Another UI update worth mentioning is that when a document is unpublished unsuccessfully, the actual error message for the toast is now exposed for you to use. Version 3.39 shipped with a mistake that was very quickly fixed in 3.39.1. The biggest feature in 3.39 is folders. As of version 3.39, you can enable folders by going to your payload config, adding the folders option to your config, and then providing a slug, which I will just call payload folders. Then you can enable this per collection by going into your collection, and again at the root level, adding folders and setting it to true. You can now see fields from named groups in your list view as separate columns. Before this version, the group was just returned as an object and shoved into a single column. But now you can see the actual item in a column. So we're going to add a new field that's going to be a named group. So I will have a field of type group, and it'll have a name just of named group to make it very easy to see. And then we'll have our fields, which will have a type of text and a name of name. And so when I hit save, we'll see that pop in here, and I will just call it name. And if I go back to the list view and add our named group name to our list view, I can see the column show up here instead of object notation for the named group in this column. You can now add a date field to your form builder plugin. First, we need to install that plugin. And when that gets installed, we can import our form builder plugin from the plugin form builder. And down in our plugins, we can add our form builder plugin, which we'll configure to just have our fields and set date to true. So I can save that and come over to our new forms collection that gets created and create a new form. And we can see that date has been added to the end of the card array here. In version 3.39, the ability to style your text in your lexical rich text field has been added. Now, I've done a whole video on how to set this up and render it on the front end, and you can find a link to that video in the description. If you are on version 3.39, do keep in mind that the project in that video is on a later version. Later versions fixed bugs that made that video possible, as well as exported the default colors to be used on the client side. One last feature worth mentioning here is that the relationship input and field are now both exported and available to be used by you to make creating custom components for relationships even easier. While folders were released in version 3.39, they actually weren't usable until version 3.39.1 came out. This version simply just fixed the export path needed to use the folders option. A new prop is available to you when creating an auth strategy that allows you to set headers. Some auth strategies want to set headers for you, but Next.js is typically really restricted in the headers you can set. In fact, headers in Next.js are read-only. This new prop allows you to use API responses to send headers. As of version 3.40, you're able to use hooks for before and after the reset password operation. So we'll add our hooks, and in our hooks, we will include a before operation hook, which will use an async function that takes operation as an argument and just check if operation, and so we can see the type show up, is reset password. And you'll set it up something like this. Similar to how it is in version 3.39, where grouped fields are now given their own columns, that's true now for version 3.40 for tab fields. This looks and acts exactly the same as the group field. In version 3.40, you can add constraints to who can add presets to everyone. So we're going to go over to our users collection and just add a roles select field. So this will be a type of select with a name of roles. We can set has many to true and options to admin and user. Now, we're not going to set up any true functionality to this role-based access control, but if you would like to do that, I do have a video on how to set up basic role-based access controls in your users collection, and there's a link to that video in the description. But now we're just going to go to our payload config, and then we're going to add some query presets, and in our query presets, we can add more code here, but we're just going to use our filter constraints, and we're going to use our rec and our options, and we'll open a set of parentheses for our first check, which will check if our request user roles does not include admin. If it doesn't, we can filter out our options for our option and check the type of option is equal to string. If it is, we'll return the option. Otherwise, we'll return the option value. and check to make sure it doesn't equal user. Otherwise, we'll just return our options. Query presets also requires an access object as well as a constraints object, which I won't cover in this video. And speaking of filters, you now have filter options available in select fields. So I'm going to create a new checkbox field to start. So this will be a checkbox field with the name of no option 1. And then we'll have a select field, which will be just named select to be extra clear. It'll be a type of select. Then we'll pass in our options, which will have a label of 1, value of 1. Then we'll do this twice more, value of 1, and then change this to be 2, and then finally 3. And then we'll add our filter options, which is going to take a function, but we'll have our options data and sibling data, as well as our rec available to us. Now, I won't use all of these, but it is nice to know that they are available to be used. But we're just going to use data and check the status of no option 1. And if that's true, then I will filter through our options and pull out our option and check type of option is equal to string. If it is, it'll return the option. Otherwise, it'll return the option.value and check that it's not equal to 1. And otherwise, we'll just return all the options. So I can save this and refresh, and then go back to my posts. And we'll see that we have no option 1 here. But if I open my select field, I see 1, 2, and 3. If I click no option 1, I can see 2 and 3 now. Now that in itself is not very useful, but as you can see, we do have access to the user object here. So I know I'm logged in as an admin user, so I can check that my user roles includes admin. And of course, that means if it does include admin, it will filter out the option 1 for me. So if I refresh, leave page, we can see that no option 1 is not selected, and we still see that 1 is not here because I'm currently the admin role. But if I set that to not include admin, 1 returns because I have access to that option now. In version 3.41, you're now able to optionally exclude documents from appearing in Browse by Folder view. So I'm going to go to our folders here, and underneath slug include Browse by Folder and set it to be false. You can do the same thing in your collections by changing folders true to include the Browse by Folder option and set it to false as well. Also for folders, you can now use document drawers to edit and create new folders. This was a simple UI adjustment, so there's nothing you need to do to opt into this. TurboPack got some compatibility updates as well. You don't need to do anything beyond upgrading to opt into this. It seems like the biggest barrier to going all in with TurboPack is some SCSS compatibility issues. You're now able to do polymorphic join queries by fields that don't exist on all collections. Before this version, a query error would be thrown when you tried to do this. As for bug fixes, you're now able to leave unnamed groups unlabeled as well. So if I just remove that label, we see that there is no issue with removing it. You're now also able to add an image through the meta image component. Before this version, you could only use existing uploads. Now you're able to upload an image right from your SEO configuration. Default colors for the text state feature were a server-only export before this version. Now you can export those default colors to be used in client components. Again, I have a video on how to set all of that up, and the link is in the description. Before version 3.42, running payload generate import map failed if the file wasn't found. Now, if the file isn't found, but the directory exists, whether a custom directory or the default directory, the import map file will be created for you. As of version 3.42, you can now add custom logic to how you map data to the CSV data using the import-export plugin. And you can do this on a field by field basis. You'd add this to the field itself using the custom option in the field's config. Also in the import-export plugin, you now have the ability to enable debug logging for the plugin. Bangla, which is a new translation, was added in this version as well. So I'm going to duplicate our Latvian and pull out from BNBD our BNBD translation. And this one imports a little bit differently, where now in our supported language, we need to use a string representation of our BNBD and rename it to the BNBD constant from the translation's languages. The date field for the form plugin, first introduced in version 3.39, didn't have its type exported until this version, so that is fixed now. Another text state feature bug was fixed in this version as well. There was a bug where if you tried to use 2 or more styles on the same piece of text, only the most recent or the latest added styles would be applied instead of all of the styles as you would expect. Before we head into versions 3.43 and beyond, check to make sure you're subscribed to my channel and receiving notifications so you never miss when I release more videos about Payload CMS, Next.js, Tailwind CSS, and more. If you're tired of trying to keep up with all of the web development news, consider subscribing to my newsletter, Next in Dev, where I'll provide a bi-weekly overview of all the news I can find from across the internet about important key news and topics about web development technology. There's a link to that in the description. Thank you for your support. Now let's get back to it with version 3.43. As of version 3.43, you can now add custom components to your upload fields. So I'm first going to go to my post config and we're going to add a new field, which will be an upload field. And we'll just call this one media with a relation to media. And then we're going to create a new component called upload control. So in my source directory, I'll just create a new file in the app directory in the components folder called uploadcontrol.tsx. And then we're just going to export a constant just called example button and set it equal to a function that just returns a simple button that says test button, just so we can see this in action. One last thing we'll need to change is in our media config itself. And in our media.ts file, we'll change true to accept an object, which will have an admin option. And in our admin, we'll have components, which will add controls. And we just need to add a string path here, which is going to be to our app components, custom upload control.tsx example button. Now we can run payload generate import map. And when I refresh and click create new on our media, we see this test button show up here. Now, of course, I didn't add any functionality, so that won't do anything. Also in this version, a new option has been added to the after change hook. So I'll add an after change hook to see this in action, where we'll have async, and the new option is data. So I can add our data here, and then just as an example, we can run console log data. Now, before this version, data was not available in an after change hook. So this is brand new. For the Postgres database adapter, you're now able to store blocks as JSON in your database. This can help with performance when you have a lot of blocks. You'll need to pass blocks as JSON to your Postgres database adapter. Also for the Postgres adapter, support was added for read replicas, which can help offload read-heavy traffic. The version diff view overhaul has been completed. Now you have access to a locale selector, as well as a bunch of different updated designs for all of the different fields. There's also a new column order for the selected version. You don't need to opt into this change, you simply need to upgrade to version 3.43 or higher. Pre-signed URL downloads for S3 can now be set dynamically, and you'll do this in your payload config by going to S3 storage and in our signed downloads. And under expires in, you can add should use signed URL. And when you do this, it's expecting a function. And this function will take a collection, file name, and our rec object. And we can check, for example, if file name includes something like private, which indicates that it should have a signed URL. We can return true, that it should have a signed URL. In all other cases, it can return false, it should not have a signed URL. Again, I don't have this configured, so I'll just comment all of this out. There's a new security feature included in version 3.44. If you use Postgres or SQLite and a local auth strategy, you're going to need to run a new migration for this update. A new auth session identifier is now stored in your database automatically. You can opt out of this behavior by going to your user's auth config and change auth from true to use sessions false. Now, this is just an example. I'm just going to use true. Now, this is a more secure pattern, which is why Payload CMS is enforcing it as an opt-out feature. The primary benefit of this new pattern is that you have access to full session functionality when using Payload's local authentication strategy. Additionally, a collection level disable bulk edit has been added to your collections. And so if we want to disable, we'll set this to true, and then this means that any bulk action in your list view will be disallowed. Now, I can't go in here and do anything other than delete because disable bulk edit is true. But now if I set this back to false, I can see that the edit button comes back and is now operational. A new REST endpoint has been added to the import-export plugin. The API preview data allows you to preview JSON and CSV data accurately while using the plugin. Version 3.45 allows you to make changes to a document and then go to the live preview tab. Before this update, you would have to abandon your changes and go through the leave without saving modal in order to spin up your live preview. With some work that was done in version 3.44, you're able to set preferences to if you want the live preview to be open automatically when you go to a document as well. You'll also notice that the live preview tab has been removed in favor for an eye icon. If you want to learn how to implement live preview as well as drafts and versions, you can find my video on how to do that in the description. Also in version 3.45, there was some work done for Drizzle support. A new upload option has been added to your media collections in version 3.46. What this looks like is over here in our media config. In our upload option, we can add allow restricted file types to true. This defaults to false, so anything that Payload CMS or your browser might deem to be malicious or unknown would not be accepted unless this was set to true. Allow restricted file types gets overwritten by your MIME types. So if you have an array of MIME types, which are the allowable types to be uploaded, allow restricted file types will be ignored and you won't be able to upload, say, like a PNG. In version 3.47, you're able to use things like join, select, populate, and more in the Me API endpoint. This, as well as adding draft and depth, is mostly work that's being done ahead of the e-commerce plugin and template. A new function called sanitize user data for email is now exported from payload/shared. This is used to ensure that no malicious or executable code is added to the HTML template. Now, instead of a not found page being returned if a collection item isn't found, you'll get a warning and a notice saying that a post can't be found or a collection item can't be found. So here, I'll just type in ABC as a post ID, which clearly does not exist. And if I hit enter and try to navigate, we'll see that the document with ID ABC could not be found and a reason why it may not be found. In the same vein, your admin collections now redirects just to admin. This is also true for globals, and this is because your admin/collections and admin globals don't exist. Now, if you do have a view that's /collections or /globals, don't worry, a check is done before the redirect to make sure that that path does not actually exist. For the import-export plugin, a delayed toast is now displayed to give some kind of user interaction that something is happening, that data is being processed. This also disables the download button and any other key features that might mess with the export process. A big new feature was released in version 3.47, which allows you to copy and paste things like arrays and blocks. Let's see this in action by creating in our post config. We're going to create a new array field. So this will be type array, name, we'll call this copy and paste array, and it'll have just a single field that will be type text and name copy. So I can save that and go to our posts, and we can see that we have a copy and paste array now. I'll add a single item that says text1, and then I can copy this row, add a new row, and then paste the row in. Now, this is just the first iteration of this feature, so we should expect more robust features to come out soon. As it is now, this is how you copy and paste, where you need to add either a blank array or just be okay with you overwriting your initial array item here. In version 3.48, a new operation was added, find distinct. This allows you to retrieve all unique values from a specific field. For example, we can just go to one of our hooks to see this in action, and we can get our request, which should have our payload object in it. Then we can await payload find distinct, and you'll search through things like your collection of posts, and then say we had a field of title that had duplicate titles. And so what this will do is, instead of returning any duplicate title, it'll only return the first distinct option from each document. So if you have two documents with the title of Title 1, for example, only one document with Title 1 will be returned. This find distinct operation is not available in REST API or GraphQL. A few updates were made to the import-export plugin as well. First, you can exclude specific fields using the custom option that I talked about back in version 3.42. You can simply add disabled true to your plugin config. You can also force the export format to be either CSV or JSON by setting format to CSV or JSON as a string. Lastly, you're now able to disable the save and download buttons based on access controls. Set disable save or disable download to true if you don't want those features to be included. Create link node and is link node have been exported from rich text lexical to be used on the server side. Folders can now be scoped on the collection, which means that they are no longer shared across all collections unless you want them to be. You can combine this with browse by folders set to false, introduced in version 3.41, to completely isolate your collection folders from other collections. Lastly, a localized property was added to the meta title component in the SEO plugin. Now, titles and descriptions can both be localized in the SEO plugin. A new trash feature has been added in version 3.49. Now, it's not a bad feature, it's a feature for soft deleting documents. You can simply add trash to true to your collection. And what this is going to do is, in your collection view, is this new trash view is added. This will contain anything that you don't delete permanently. So if I now delete this, I can skip trash and delete permanently, or I can just move one post to the trash. When I do that, I see it here, which then allows me to restore or delete it entirely. So I'll restore this document. You can now group documents by fields in the list view when enabled. This is helpful when you need to view multiple categories across a large data set. Let's test this in my posts collection by adding a new field, which will be a text type that will be name category. Then we'll go to all posts and duplicate this a couple of times. So first we will set a category of category 1. Then we'll duplicate, have category 2, duplicate again, have category 3, and then just to show this off, have category 1 again. So now back in posts, we'll go to our config and go into our admin and include in our admin object here, group by, and set that to true. And when I set this to true, we see a new control added here called group by. When I click on that, I can choose what field I want to group by. Now, I can really choose any of this, but the only ones that are going to have duplicate information is category here. So if I click category, we now see we have category 1, 2, and 3. Category 1 has 2 documents, just like I set. 2 and 3 each have 1. Now again, maybe I don't want 2 in category 1. I can just delete and confirm, and that ends up in trash again. One thing to note about the trash is that this new deleted at timestamp is added as well. New jobs tools were added in this version as well. You can now set schedules per tasks in the jobs config. This includes the ability to set hooks before and after the schedule, the actual cron schedule itself, as well as a queue name. In version 3.50, a new Indonesian translation was added, so we'll just duplicate our Bangla translation and pull out our new Indonesian translation, and we can add that to our supported languages as the option of ID. Also in version 3.50, missing hooks were added to the restore version collection operation. For the trash feature introduced in version 3.49, the count operation has been updated to respect the trash argument in queries. Finally, you're now able to pass count true in GraphQL to a join query. Previously, passing this argument would result in an error even though the documentation said it was a supported feature. And now we're caught back up with the most recent version of Payload CMS as of this recording. Now, chances are high that before this video even goes public, a new version of Payload CMS will be released. That's just how fast the Payload CMS team is working on new features and bug fixes. If you found this video helpful, please like it and share it with others who might also find it useful. Check to make sure you're subscribed to my channel and receiving notifications so you never miss when I release more content about Payload CMS, Next.js, Tailwind CSS, and more. If you're tired of trying to keep up with all of the industry news, consider subscribing to my newsletter, Next in Dev. I'll provide bi-weekly overviews of all the news I can find across the internet about modern web development. There's a link for that in the description. If you have suggestions or questions, please leave those in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Until then, I'll see you on the next one.